Welcome to the People Productivity Channel, where you are the product and a better you is a solution. In every episode, we bring on very interesting guests who have some tips, techniques, and thoughts to share that can help just about everyone in terms of their business, their career, and even their life. So today I have on a very interesting guest. Steve Stanton was introduced to me a few years back. We did a series of blog posts together. And Steve, has been a thought leader through much of his life. He worked with Dr. Hammer on re-engineering the enterprise. He built a very successful business. He's an author, he's a lecturer, teacher, and now he's working with nonprofits. He's helping nonprofits. And this is interesting because, people often think about nonprofits as these very unsophisticated organizations, but in fact, they're more resilient than people would imagine. And we're going to talk a little bit about resilience in the current environment, what the future might bring. And we're going to get Steve's thoughts on how organizations can evaluate resilience and become more resilient themselves. So Steve, I was real interested to hear that surprisingly, a lot of these nonprofits performed well, better than certainly I would have expected because they operate on a shoestring. So what did you find out there since you're working with a group of them?
Well, thanks, Frank, and hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. So when you first asked me let's step back a minute before we get to those nonprofits. When you first asked me to participate in this, we had discussed a title from Nietzsche, "That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Certainly, we're here in early May right now, and it's a very lively theme for the environment that we're all in right now because we're all in this shared crisis. And so that which doesn't make you stronger builds your immunity, which we're all talking about. We're all now biologists thinking about immunity. And it got me thinking about what is it that's now increasingly separating organizations, not just nonprofits, successful ones from non-successful ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to think that, that Nietzsche quote, "That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger," is actually all about resilience. Because, at its root, resilience is the ability to respond and respond well to problems. And the truth is, every organization has crises and issues,
Mm-hmm.
and how you deal with difficulty is actually the determining factor for an organization's health and long-term opportunity. And so resilience is the only thing I think that can help an organization achieve and, even more importantly, sustain high performance over time.
Yeah.
So when I talk about resilience, that's what I mean, to provide some context as we go a little deeper. That make sense?
No, that makes all the sense in the world. And I am in total agreement with you. Resilience, is a theme that, people have been talking about along with agility for a number of years. You and I even wrote some stuff on this. And the reality is, that famous Warren Buffett saying that when the tide goes out, you find out who's not wearing a bathing suit. I mean, that
Right.
is organizations who talk resilient may not have been. And, this is separating the truly resilient from the non-resilient. What kind of questions are you asking in the current environment? Not about the future, but, where we are right now, when you're with them, about having the capacity and capability to overcome challenges and, how do you work with them?
Well, it's not so much how do I work for them as much as how do I learn from the brilliant work they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I see the really successful nonprofits doing is creating a laser-like focus on which stakeholders they really need to connect with and finding ways to create better connections. And so I'm working with this cohort of small and medium-sized nonprofits in the Boston area. And, in this tough economic climate, almost every one of them has reported better fundraising success than they ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they are is the fact that they've been relentless in calling and relentless in saying, look, now's the time, relentless in being innovative. A number of them have said, you have an annual gift that you give us. We still want the annual gifts, but on top of that, we want this extra money, and we'd like it, please, in unrestricted funds. And for those of you unfamiliar with nonprofits, many donations are earmarked for a particular program or a particular line item in a budget. But what nonprofits really want is what's called unrestricted money, which is money that can be spent anywhere at the discretion of the organization. And so many of these executive directors have boldly gone out and said, look, we need a lot more unrestricted money. We have all this PPE equipment we need to buy. We have all this extra food we need to provide. We have to upgrade our technology because we're now operating virtually with our staff. And remarkably, they have raised a lot of money. When they're operating in this crisis mode, which is where many of them are right now, both they and their key stakeholders, their staff, their funders, their customers, essentially, their patients, the people they provide their mission service for, are all reacting to that crisis. And so right now, I've seen unbelievable nimbleness. Now, these are nonprofits that are not awash in resources, and that's made them, the old phrase, if we're going to do old cliches, necessity is the mother of invention. Many of these nonprofits have been able to be really innovative because they got no choice. They can't buy stuff. They have to get it somehow.
Yeah.
And that has, for many of the organizations right now, that's been successful.
You see a lot of the best of humanity come out in tough times like this. So, these are difficult times for many people, yet they're reaching deeper, giving more donations. Right. And I think you're probably seeing the same on the employee side, right? Mission-driven organization, employees stepping up.
Yeah, but it's really scary. I mean, these are organizations that many of the ones I'm talking about right now, for example, they provide housing, low-income housing.
Yeah.
And so lots of people who are particularly vulnerable, living close to each other, very needy without resources themselves, and yet your staff needs to go in and fix a broken window or deliver a meal. And so the staff is carrying this extra burden, and so the management is carrying the burden. How do we protect our staff? How do we emotionally support our staff? On one hand, the staff is feeling like they're doing this emergency, wonderful, valuable, purposeful work. On the other hand, they're endangering their families. And so it's a much more complicated environment, because when I go into that residence to fix a window, on one hand, I'm making that family that lives there safer. On the other, I could be picking up something I'm taking home that makes my mother or my children at risk. Complicated world.
That's a really, really complicated world. I agree with you, and you have to applaud all of these people who are right on the front line, really making a difference in lives. And oftentimes, we think immediately about these emergency workers in the medical profession, but people forget about all of these really, really brave souls in nonprofits reaching out to help those most in need at a time like this. And I think that's just, that's incredible. They're like the unsung heroes in some ways.
Right. And that's, to me, what resilience is, what do you do when the excrement hits the fan? Do you freak out? Do you turn autocratic? I was reading about, I'll name it, Hillstones. They're a chain of restaurants they're opening up, and they have required that their employees, who are servers, waiters, and waitresses, can't wear masks. They think it doesn't suit their image.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to behave to a crisis. On the other hand, you see lots of other organizations. I saw a clip from Clorox the other day where they have they make sanitary products, and of which we can't get enough of right now. But if you take a look at the video, if you hear what their leaders are saying, they're saying we now have reordered our priorities, and employee safety is number one.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I applaud that.
Right, it's different than So compare how Clorox versus Hillstone is reacting, and you can see which one may have a better future.
Yeah, without a doubt. one's worried about image, one's worrying about life safety. I think life safety is number one all the time. It just has
And
to be.
employees are not stupid,
No.
and they see what's going on. When you work at Tyson and you're being ordered to go back to a meat packing plant that's dangerous, where you're working shoulder to shoulder with people, that shapes how you feel about your employer.
Yeah, yeah, big time. And in terms of these new operational risks, it sounds like they've responded in not just a very rapid way, but in a sophisticated way in a lot of cases.
Just because they're small and poor doesn't mean they're stupid. And so a lot of these nonprofits are full, people who work in nonprofits have mission, not profit, as their core defining success factor.
Yeah.
And lots of people have chosen mission because it's so meaningful.
Hmm.
And in a time of uncertainty, having a sense of purpose from your work, in addition to a paycheck, is enormously valuable. And so one of the primary characteristics of successful resilience is helping employees find a sense of meaning in
Hmm.
their work. So it's not just going in to collect a paycheck or kill some hours. Meaning is really different. I mean, I describe meaning as an old story. Imagine you're in the Middle Ages and you're walking around and you see somebody hacking at a piece of stone with a mallet and a chisel, and you ask them what they're doing. They said, "I'm hacking at a stone with a chisel." And then you walk to another person and you see the same scene of somebody hacking at a stone with a mallet and a chisel, and you ask them what they're doing. But the second person says, "I'm building a cathedral."
Yeah.
And
So true.
that's what I mean by meaning and providing a sense of purpose. And so
Yeah.
resilience, I think, as a start, requires that sense of meaning and purpose across the organization.
Yeah. And to reaffirm that purpose at a time like this so that they don't go adrift. Many
Right,
leaders are not particularly adept at sharing meaning with their
right.
people. So, in many traditional for-profit companies, people go through the day, the week, and the year, and, they're getting a paycheck.
I,
And, the great thing about nonprofits is they are mission driven. It's very, very clear, and people are attracted to it. So,
so one of the reasons I like working with nonprofits is, frankly, there's less hypocrisy. In lots of the large and medium-sized and small nonprofit for-profits I work with, they have a statement of values. Here are our corporate values, and quite a number of them, they were simply bullshit.
yeah,
And they weren't real. And the organization would give cards out with their 7 key values, in terms of safety or customers, and then they'd be still maximize profits and putting shareholders over customers and employees every chance they got.
yes, for
And
sure.
and that hypocrisy removes value and makes an organization less resilient.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I think, it's very, very good to hear that, these nonprofits are behaving in a very intelligent and even sophisticated way to respond to the current environment. So, in a way, they're feeling good about the current state. They've managed to get out to fundraisers. That's good, maybe an exaggeration, but, they've adapted to it. And, now they've got to think about the future and what might come.
Right.
And, maybe we could, talk about the Johari window and how that
Right.
might play into this. And I know you did write an article, and we'll include the link on things that nonprofits should really be asking themselves. So maybe we can go through some of that.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't, I hate for anybody listening to this to think that nonprofits are having a good time right now.
Yeah.
This is not a party. This is a tremendously difficult time when they're being pulled. The dangers and risks are up. The workload is higher. This is a crisis, and we behave a certain way in a crisis. What's going to be interesting, and what I'm beginning to hear from the smart nonprofits I talk to, is okay, in a crisis, our funders are giving us more money, our employees are going the extra mile. What do we do when the crisis recedes and we go next?
Yeah.
Into that unknown. And so you had mentioned the Johari window. I'm not sure if everybody who's listening knows what it is. The Johari window, it is a model. Imagine a circle with 4 quadrants. And it was created, when I first heard about it, Johari, I thought it was created by some amazing tribe in the middle of the
Yeah.
jungle. But it turns out that it was 2 psychologists, Johnson and Harrison, who created this model. And it's got 4 quadrants, and it really defines technically epistemology, or the understanding of knowledge. And so in quadrant 1, you can think of it as the stuff that we know, the knowledge that we're confident of. We know who our employees are. We know how much we have in the bank. Quadrant 2 is the stuff we don't know, that we know that we don't know. We don't know how much money we'll raise next month. We don't know whether our customers will buy our stuff. But, we are able to pose those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Quadrant 3 is the stuff that we don't know that we do know. The information that's in an employee's head, or a file cabinet, or an email that we can't access or share. And the issue there is, how can we access and share all that knowledge? The really important quadrant, and the reason I'm telling this story, is the 4th quadrant, which is the stuff that we don't know that we don't know. The questions we haven't thought about asking, so we can't even begin to collect data. And that's where the nonprofits I'm talking to, and most organizations today, are headed into that quadrant where we don't know what we don't know. The military calls that the UNC, the unknown unknown. That's where danger and surprises come from. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not on the lookout, if you're not illuminating what you don't know, that's where bad things will happen. And so part of how resilience occurs is organizations need the humility to say, there are some things we don't know, and we have to begin to figure out how to shine a light so we know more about it. One of the hypocrisies I find in many of the for-profits I work with is the arrogance of senior executives who never say the following words: I don't know. Mm-hmm. There's a certain political figure who will remain unnamed, who never says, I don't know. And the key to resilience is just the opposite, to say, we're heading into the unknown. What are the big questions we haven't thought about? What are the black swans that can come at us, unexpected events? What are the things we don't know that we really need to know? And how can we begin to get the data to make those things a little more known, so we can move things from the unk to the stuff that we know we don't know?
Yeah.
And resilience is around having the humility to ask really hard questions and admit you don't know, but then do something to get smarter about them.
Yeah, phenomenal.
We're all, by the way, heading into the unk right now.
I think this is really the big question, is what may the future very well hold, because people have been able to react, and many have accommodated the current environment relatively well. I think many were surprised maybe how resilient they were, and it's not just nonprofits, but companies in general. They've kept operating. Now we get into this new unknown world, which is, what would a recovery look like? What is the world going to look like? Supply chains are going to shift. Companies are going to disappear. And, this is going to create new challenges. And so what have you posed to these nonprofits in terms of examining the unk?
Well, that's where a lot of the really clever ones are already going. And they're using tools that had previously been considered very sophisticated, but really aren't. For example, scenarios. One of the ways you illuminate the unk is you pose some scenarios and say, if X, Y, and Z happen, what do we do? Mm-hmm. Or if X, Y, and Z might be happening in the future, what's an early warning so that we can detect it before it becomes too problematic? Mm-hmm. So even small nonprofits that I know of right now are beginning to do more scenario planning so that they can begin to think of what might happen. Another tool that I see others using is much more sophisticated financial modeling. okay, if revenues go down here, but costs go here, what might we do? In a sense, it's financial scenarios.
Hmm.
Um, Becoming much more nimble when the future is unknowable, and essentially it is unknowable. Um, Clever organizations begin to prepare a set of defensive behaviors so that when something unexpected happens, at least you know what to do about it. Or you need, really good organizations are looking ahead and looking for what I call those tripwires or early warning signals that something may happen so that you can be better prepared.
Hmm.
So if you're a nonprofit and you're expecting a certain amount of money from some funders and some early funder gives you an unexpected response, you can use that to extrapolate a little bit about what your income might be and in advance perhaps adjust your expenses
Hmm.
um, to deal with it rather than have to at the last minute overreact.
Hmm.
And so that means organizations have to get smarter, more sentient,
Yeah.
more sensing
External
um,
sensing.
to do that. And we used to think that you needed a big staff and a lot of money to do it. No, you just need to be scared out of your wits to be doing this. A
Yeah,
healthy dose of fear will motivate you better than a big war chest to really be thinking this way.
a healthy dose of fear does bring clarity of thought very, very quickly. The brain is an amazing engine, and it will start to help you focus in on things in a way you couldn't before. You're much less distracted, right?
Right, there's that old Dr. Johnson quote, there's nothing like the prospect of a hanging in the morning to sharpen your mind.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, that's right. And you don't, and sometimes the absence of resources forces you to find other ways to do it.
that's right. Necessity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But,
So,
but these are going to be tough times for all organizations. Certainly not, we're going to see um, a change in the number of organizations. There's a theory, if you don't mind my hypothesizing, if you study biology,
yeah.
there's an element of historical biology called speciation, which is taking a look at the number of different species alive on Earth across all animal kingdoms. If we just
Yeah.
look at animal, and when people often think that that number has been growing over time, but if you map the number of species alive at any point in time, you actually see it's pretty jagged. There are certain times when there's massive die-offs.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an event like the comet that may, or the meteorite that may have
Yep.
knocked out the dinosaurs. And so you see what's called technically in the world of biology, punctuated equilibrium.
Mm.
And I think that there's a risk with this COVID event of some form of punctuated equilibrium where a number of nonprofits either uh, collaborate and come together or smaller and weaker ones die off.
Yes. This is the death of the weakest. That is what we're
Right.
going to see, right? In
Right.
general,
And
that
that's
would
what we
be.
see biologically. If we
Yeah.
look at you and I had spoken, the dominant victims of COVID are older people with pre-existing conditions. The organizations that will be most affected are the ones that had pre-existing weaknesses that are
Yes.
getting exposed. They could be financial weaknesses, they could be customer satisfaction weaknesses, they could be staff dissatisfaction
Culture.
weaknesses.
Yeah. Cultural weaknesses that really are going to come to a head at this point in time when people
Right.
aren't necessarily going to do everything in their power to help the place, succeed.
And so that brings us back to the title. For these organizations, that which doesn't kill them from their pre-existing conditions
Hmm.
makes them stronger.
Yeah.
Because the key is to not just survive a crisis, not just to survive corona, not just to survive today's problems, but how do you take advantage of it? How do you learn the lessons from today to become even stronger next year?
Yeah.
And to
And
make sure
Steve.
there's a word for for people or organizations who make the same mistake over and over again: stupid.
Yeah.
So how can the organizations listening here not be stupid?
Your
And
book, your book, how do why smart organizations do so many stupid things. It's
now, why
almost
do organizations full of so many smart people still do so many stupid things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good book. I have it. It's very interesting. And, you see this repeated time and time again. And it really, really, is true. I love the biological analogy because we will see a die off, but it was one that was coming that is going to be accelerated by this crisis. So
Exactly.
instead of a slow die off, you get a rapid die off. And
Right.
the theme of emerge stronger is one I continue to run into. And I think it's a great way for companies to look at this and embrace this moment in time that, the company and the people emerge stronger together as some of the weaker competitors who may have been, in the market they were in, maybe they were underpricing stuff, doing things just to stay alive. They're going to be gone and there'll be a new equilibrium.
Right. Well, I mean, for a number of the people who are watching this, think about how you have personally responded to the last couple of months. Now, a lot of us are scuffling and scared, but some of us have taken more time to experience nature because we haven't had much else to do. Some
Mhm.
of us have renewed old relationships.
Yeah.
Some of us have read books that we haven't had time to read or taken the time to learn more. Those silver linings are a way that people can capitalize on the unexpected. Now, not everybody's had that luxury, so I don't want to overstate it,
Yeah.
but there are ways to take advantage of crises to move forward in a better way.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'm always of the opinion that the sun is coming back out. And, you people as individuals, they really need to think about how they emerge stronger. Even though there's some turbulence in the meantime, there are a lot of unknowns. Black swans may come out of that last, the number 4 Johari window, and it's going to happen. But, how you react, how you find that energy and resilience that's inside you already, right? You're born with
Yeah,
this. And I think it's a great time in many ways because I think and not because of the pain and suffering and everything that we're going through, but that in some ways these do lead to a better future down the road. And I'm not
right.
sure how long it takes, um, but a lot of people will find new things within themselves. Companies will find new things within themselves, and they will, in many cases, emerge stronger out of this, and we'll see new
Certainly hope so.
opportunities. Yeah, I certainly hope so too. So, Steve, always great interview, buddy. Do you have any parting thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Um, be safe, stay sane, take advantage of the opportunities if you have them right now, and don't be stupid.
Yeah, and feel free to look Steve up on LinkedIn. He's got a few posts, recent ones that are very interesting. We'll make note of those in the notes for this interview. You can find his book on Amazon. He's a great guy. And Steve, real fun
And
having you on, buddy. You're always interesting, and very much appreciate you sharing your thoughts and time with our audience.
thank you, Frank, and thank you all. Take care.
Take care.